Hello, we're going to pick up in this video on page 1189 to continue our discussion in chapter 32. At this point, we've learned a little bit about the basic structure of databases, and hopefully you've already had a couple of experiences, both with just databases in general, learning the language SQL. Usually that's done in the advanced database class, and maybe a little bit of MySQL in the PHP classes. Just depends on what sequence you've worked in. Now, the important part here, as we transition from kind of the beginning part of the chapter to the latter part of the chapter, is understanding how things tie together. Java, like many other programming languages, has specific approaches for connecting to and manipulating databases. What you should have learned so far in your programming studies is that most, robust applications and even not so robust applications very often have a database sitting behind them to both store data and retrieve data for further manipulation, and often really help drive the entire application. Java does have what they call the JDBC, and as you see here, it's an API for accessing relational database. Now, if you're asking yourself, what is an API? An API is an application programming interface that basically provides a set of tools or libraries that allow you to perform certain actions relative to other pieces of software or websites. So, for example, the Java API for doing database applications is called JDBC, and that is not an acronym for anything. That's just what it's called. Some people will say that it's for Java Database Connector, and maybe that's the case, but they never really spelled out the acronym, so nobody really truly knows. But that is the tool that's built in, and that connector basically allows us to issue SQL statements to manipulate a database. Now, the type of database that we would connect to is really very subjective because it'll depend on what type of system you're working with. So you can see here two very popular databases. One is MySQL, the other one is Oracle. And then keep in mind that the Oracle database is very closely related with Java, and the reason for that is that's the same company that owns Java, and so therefore a very tight relationship. They also have this additional approach here where you can see MySQL and Oracle have drivers that deal directly with the database. If you are looking to access a Access database by Microsoft, you need to have this bridge driver first and then the regular Microsoft driver. Keep in mind that with the Microsoft products, there's also SQL Server, which I think they almost kind of intentionally leave out of the book. But it's true that probably one of the more popular ones to use, at least in terms of rudimentary programming, is MySQL. Not that MySQL is a low-level database, but usually people starting out will tend to have access to that because it's a free product, easy to load on a local machine for development, and is offered on most web hosting services as well. Okay, let's move on. Now, when you're actually creating applications, the Java JDBC API basically provides a bunch of different things to allow us to do our work. And really, for the majority of what we're doing, what it's providing are a number of different class files that have things built into them for doing some of our basic database stuff. Some of the real key ones, especially for us here, are going to be these. So you can see that we'll have a driver, a connection, a statement, and a result set. And in terms of the hierarchy, this is what it looks like. So in order to be able to do any work with the database, we do have to have the database driver installed so that we can even talk to it. Once we have that going, we can then, from our application, go through the driver and initiate a connection to the database, whether that's a local database on your machine, on your network, or out on the internet somewhere. It can manipulate any of those or connect to any of those. Once you have the connection, then you would issue your database statements, your SQL statements, that will have, you know, a series of commands or queries or whatnot that will then talk to the database and bring back some results that we can then use in our application. So that's kind of the grand overview of the whole thing. All right, so in order for us to work with Java and databases, we have a certain number of steps that we go through. Now, before I dig into each one separately, I'm going to kind of just bounce through them really quick, and then I'll come back here to talk about them in detail. But you can see basically the approach is this. One is loading up your drivers. Once you have your drivers, you establish that connection. That was what we just saw on the previous page there. Then we create the statements that will do the work. These statements will then be executed. Then we will process the result set. So, you know, whatever comes back, we'll manipulate it. And that will basically be the crux of it. So it really, from an overview standpoint, doesn't seem that bad. But what we need to do is get this all to work first before we can do any of it. All right, so if the first part is loading drivers, I guess what we have to do is figure out where those drivers are. So that's going to imply to you that some of them aren't present on your machine, and that might be the case. Now, it does depend on what authoring software you're using. There's certain development environments in which all the required tools are either present or easily added. But you can never count on the fact that those components are there, and often you need to check. And then in some cases, and I think Eclipse is one of them, if I'm not mistaken, where if you have the library already available, that does not necessarily mean that you'll be able to access it even though it's there, and it should read it automatically. So sometimes you have to go in and manually just ensure that it's there and active. And we're going to walk through that in just a moment. But in order to connect to a MySQL database, which is what we're going to do in this class for a number of different reasons, mostly because as students, you guys do have access to one of the gateway web servers. Right now, we're currently working with Mercury, but in the upcoming semester or two, we're going to be switching over to a new system. But the advantage of those gateway servers is that MySQL is loaded and attached to each individual student account. The other thing about MySQL is if you wish, you can also download the product and run it locally on your own machine as a standalone database package. Or if you already have a locally installed web server software combination, or web server stack is really what it is, such as XAMPP or WAMP or MAMP, those have a MySQL component available and therefore is accessible locally on your system as well. So depending on which approach you choose to use, you still will need to have the drivers in place in order to be able to talk to the database. So really our next step here is to actually go to the MySQL website. So here I am at mysql.com. And this is an interesting site to explore. I mean, I don't expect you guys to spend a whole bunch of time looking through this, but if you were ever to want to download MySQL to run on your own machine, and that would be independent of web server software, you can do that directly from the site here, from the people that actually develop it. Now, we need to do some downloads, and your intuition might say, okay, I'm going to go to the download page and we'll get working from there. But this is not necessarily the easy way to get to the resources that we need. So this is really for downloading, you know, the actual database product. That's what this page is intended for. If you were actually going to go to the trouble of doing that, what you'll want to download is just the community edition, which would do everything we need to do and really does a lot of what the bigger, more robust versions do. It's just not designed for deploying in like an enterprise environment where there's a real heavy traffic load and advanced features that we'll probably never touch. So what we're going to do is jump over to the developer zone because we are programmers, and we need to get that particular piece of software that's going to make this all go for us. All right, from here, what we're going to look for are the downloads related to this particular page. But before I actually go ahead and click the download, what you might want to consider doing for those of you that are interested in working with MySQL on a little bit more of an intense level is downloading this tool here. MySQL Workbench is a product that's very similar to working with the SQL Server Management Studio. It has a similar interface and it operates in a very similar fashion. So if you're used to working with databases that way, this is a great product to download. It's completely free and very, very powerful. And because the machine I'm working on right now, this has a fairly fresh install of Windows 10, I'm actually going to go ahead and do the download. So you can see I'm coming in here to do that. And I'm actually going to find the 64-bit version to download. So I'm just going to click that. And that's, once again, not something you need to do. But one of the things I want to demonstrate here is by clicking on something here to download, it looks like you have to log in or sign up. But the truth is there's this little link right here that that's all you need to click. All right, so I'm going to go back to the previous page. And now I'm going to click on the MySQL downloads once again in the developer zone. And then once you get in here, what we're looking for are the database connectors. So we're going to come and click on connectors. And then the one that we want is the connector J, which is designed for working with Java. Now, please keep in mind that if you're working with other programming languages or other database systems, you do have some options here, and I think most of them are pretty intuitive for the most part. Like, for example, the ODBC is for Microsoft stuff, .NET is for .NET, and therefore usually working like Visual Studio based applications in SQL Server. We also have connectors for Python, C++, and C, other very big development languages. And then there's also a native driver that is for PHP. And that is, basically a tool that usually is built into your web host, so you don't usually concern yourself with it. But the one that is going to be for us is going to be this particular product here. Notice the version number, and I'm looking back in the book here at this point, and I'm looking at the one that they have listed is 5.1.26. And then you can see on the website it has been updated apparently a number of times since that point. And then when you go to do the download, you need to be very acutely aware of the fact that Java, because it is a platform independent programming language, meaning doesn't matter what platform you're on, you can code for it, because you have to remember that Java executes on the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, or the runtime environment, depending on how you look at it. And it really doesn't matter. But if you are on a PC and you download a tar file, which is a compressed format for Linux and Unix type operating systems, which includes the Mac OS, you would then download this one. For Windows PCs, we would use a zip archive. So let's go ahead and do the download here. And once again, you have that same setup with the buttons. You can just skip those buttons. Just click that and let it do the download. You can see it's actually not that big of a file. And then what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to pull it up in my folder, and I'm actually going to cut it. And I'm going to take this and put it on my drive on my machine here, right by my Eclipse folder. I'm not going to actually place it in there right now. I'm just going to paste it in here. And I'm going to give it a double click and just take a look at what's inside. And you can see it's basically a collection of files, but the file that we're primarily concerned with is this one here. So just please keep that in mind as we're working, because a lot of times you'll download these repositories and you'll be wondering, okay, what is really applicable here? But it really is the jar file that concerns us for the most part. Okay, now that we have that here in this state here, I'm actually going to go ahead and unzip this stuff. And depending on what piece of software you're using, your unzipping interface will look a little bit different. But I am going to just unload or unzip this to my second hard drive here and put it in my software folder. And really, it doesn't matter where it sits as long as we have access to it. And I'm going to show you in just a few minutes how to make sure that everything's in the path correctly so that we can execute the things we need to. So let's just go ahead and choose that folder. And although it seemed like it didn't do much of anything, it actually did, or should have. Let's see. There is the folder it created. And then you can see as I unpack it, there it is. And it seems to me that I only unzipped the one. And you know what? That's probably not a good thing. It's probably better to go back up to the top here and just unzip everything. So let's actually go ahead and unzip it again. If you happen to do it the right way, you obviously don't need to do this step. Still went pretty fast. Clearly did a whole lot more stuff. And now you can see that it unzipped it here, which is also not what I wanted. You guys get to watch me fumble here so elegantly. All right, so I'm going to take this folder here and move it to the root, but in order to do that, here's what I'll do. I'll actually grab all the contents here and move them up one level. One file will conflict, and I'm just replacing it because that's a little bit easier. Now I have this extraneous folder, which I'm going to delete. So from my software folder, I have my MySQL connector for Java placed within there, and you can see where the bin jar file is. Our next step now is to actually download the Oracle JDBC driver, which is this particular file here. And I researched it to make sure that there's no newer version that would apply. And in our case, there is not. So this is actually the right file to download and the right URL to go to. So if I am to, let's say, copy, well, actually, let's try that one more time. And copy and bring it up to a tab here and go. It brings us to this page here. Now, before you actually go ahead and download anything, what you do want to make sure of is that you have this little box here to accept the license agreement so you can actually do the download. So it kind of oversees that. But notice that there is quite a number of downloads related to this, and some of them are very version specific, but all we need is this particular file here. So that's where it's located. And I just want to make sure that you don't overlook it. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I'd like to say it downloaded, but I don't think it did. It wasn't responding for me, but then what I did, and just so you guys are aware of this, is notice how this is already checked and you think that it's active, and that's not actually the case. You actually have to click it, and now you can download the software. So what that does is it actually changes these from links back to this page to the actual link to download the file. So I'm going to go ahead and click that and begin the download. But now it's asking us for an account. So I'm going to proceed with this process here and create an account. And it's not a big deal. It's not anything where they're going to harass you for money or anything like that. Make sure your password passes their standards, though. This is some exciting stuff right here, folks. Now, while I'm doing this, you could probably be doing the same thing, so may as well. Just make sure you don't check this box. All right, and there's your download beginning. And then once again, I'm going to go into this folder here and grab that file, move it over to my drive here, and then I'm going to drop it into my software folder. And that's just a habit that I've been in over the years is, aside from where installable programs go, I'll always have a software folder or two on my machine where I either drop installation files for various software or actually place, like standalone packages, like Eclipse is a standalone package that doesn't need to be installed. It just runs right from the folder. So now I have this available as well, and we can proceed on to our next step. Okay, I'm jumping back over to the book now, and in the book, on our next page, you're going to see that in order for these two files to work, we need to put them in the class path with the following DOS command. Now, this command, of course, is going to vary based upon the actual location of your file. So you'll have to adjust this path to match and the version numbers. Now we already know that this file is not going to need a change in the version number, but it will need a change in the path. This one will need a change in the path and the version number. So we have to be acutely aware of that. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring up a command prompt. And that's one way to do this, mind you. The other way is that you can actually add this permanently to your path if you wish, or optionally you could create a new text file and drop the stuff in there. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the code from the book, drop it into Notepad++ for adjustment, and then after I've adjusted it, I'm actually going to save it as a file, and then anytime I need to execute it, I will. Now, you might ask yourself, why not add this permanently to your path? You could. If you really want to, you can go into your environment settings and set up a path. However, with versions changing all the time or moving from machine to machine, sometimes it's helpful just to have the script pre-generated, so you don't have to go looking it up in a book to get it to work. So that's just my advice to you. All right, let's go ahead then and make a couple of adjustments here. So what I'm going to do is bring up my file folder where this stuff is located, and this is the MySQL connector. And if you're not aware of this, with these newer address bars, if you actually click in them and not where one of these sections are, where if you click on it, it'll just take you to that folder. Click off to the side a little bit, and then you'll get the actual path right there highlighted. You can copy it and then come back in. So the first one, and I think that probably the better way to do this, I'm not going to delete the original one, is I'll drop in the new one, and then notice that it's pointing to the actual jar file itself. And I'm assuming that that's how it wants it done. Now, if it's going to point to that actual jar file, it's pretty important that we actually have that. So this is pointing to the folder and not to the jar file. So we actually are going to have to append to that this particular file name to make it work. So what I'm going to do to grab that is I'm just going to do a rename, make sure it's all highlighted. Once again, do a copy, press escape to get out of that mode, and then come back here and I'm going to append that to this one. So now you can see I have the jar file. Additionally, I'm going to need to get rid of the original. So let's get rid of that one. And remember, there's little semicolon separators here. And then we need to adjust this other one, which is going to be very similar. We're just going to have to go up a folder level. So it's just in the software folder. That one's actually pretty easy to remember. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, paste it, and since the file name has not changed, I'm able just to do this. So now I'm going to go ahead and actually save this, and let's go put it in that particular folder here. And I'm just going to call it JDBC class path. And now I'm going to grab all of this. I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to go to my command prompt, and I'm going to paste it in. And apparently it did not copy, so let's try the copy again. Make sure we're selected. Copy. All right, and there's the whole thing, and I'm going to go ahead and execute. And that's now in memory on the system and ready to go. Okay, and I want to make a special note here. I actually paused the video for a second. What we just did here allows us to do our compiling from the command line. So I want to make that distinction that we have that software and now it's in our path and it allows us to do stuff from the command line. There is some additional steps that we need to use for working with Eclipse or NetBeans, which we're about to do in a second here. So I'm going to pause the video one more time and I'll be back in just a moment.